From port keys to plans to the Triwizard Tournament itself, there are a lot of things in Goblet of Fire that really don't seem to make sense whatsoever to people who read and watch the series. So today, I'm going to try to take 6 common misconceptions and try to explain them a little bit more in detail on why they actually do work in the series and just things that people get wrong in general. So without further ado, if you like going to more deep dives of the Harry Potter series, make sure to like and subscribe, and let's get started. First off, let's do a really easy one. Beauxbaton and Durmstrang are co-ed schools. We're done. That's it. People get that wrong. People think that Durmstrang is male, Beauxbaton is all female. So clearly, if you aren't in the UK and you're a male, you have to go to Durmstrang if you live in Europe. If you aren't in the UK and you're female and you live in Europe, you have to go to Beauxbaton. But that's not actually the case. Really what it is if you're in the northeastern side of Europe, you go to Durmstrang. If you're on the southwestern side of Europe, you go to Beauxbaton. And I also think there's a lot more homeschooling within the Central Europe area, seeing as most of the people that we meet from Beauxbaton are more French, as well as the people from Durmstrang are more German, Hungarian area. Not really sure where Durmstrang is. It's kind of just Eastern European. That's on me. But really, they're smaller schools, so clearly most Central European countries just homeschool their students. They may send them to Hogwarts, Beauxbaton, or Durmstrang, but in most cases, they probably homeschool. It's talked about slightly within the Harry Potter universe that, a lot of parents tend to homeschool. Most people in the UK send their kids to Hogwarts, which is one of the larger magical schools, which seems interesting just with the fact that we've talked about that there's maybe 400 to 500 students at Hogwarts based on how many people per house per year. So clearly, if Hogwarts is one of the bigger schools, then Beauxbaton and Durmstrang can't just take one gender. They are co-ed schools, and that's it. The movies set the precedent, though, that Beauxbaton is all female, Durmstrang is all male, and it got into people's head that they're not co-ed schools when they actually are. And Universal doesn't help with that because in their parks, the Durmstrang are all males, the Beauxbaton are all females. Maybe Universal needs to fix that. Another big thing that people usually talk about is the Triwizard Tournament. Why was Harry magically contracted to compete in the Triwizard Tournament? There's a lot of legal reasons that, if this was a contract in real life, then Harry probably would be able to get out of it, such as the Triwizard Tournament is literally for 3 wizards. To add a 4th breaks the contract. It's in the contract that each school gets 1 champion, but Hogwarts gets 2 champions. Also breaks the contract. You also have the fact that Harry didn't physically put his name in the Goblet of Fire. Somebody else did it for him. So that would break the contract. But unfortunately, that's not how magic works. Magical contracts probably fall under the same idea that magical bonds and magical vows fall under. Everybody knows the unbreakable vow. You break it, you die. It's that easy. We don't see anybody die from breaking the unbreakable vow. I think that would have put a lot more pressure on a lot of this stuff, but you have the unbreakable vow. You break it, you die. So thus, unbreakable. But there's other ones throughout the series that nobody really talks about. 2 in particular happened before the magical contract of the Goblet of Fire. Because of course you have the unbreakable vow in book 6, no weird shenanigans in book 5. Then you have the magical contract of the Goblet of Fire in book 4. In book 3, you have the mercy that Harry shows when Lupin and Sirius go to kill Pettigrew, and Harry says, no, with him dead, you're a murderer. With him alive, you're free. And at that point, he saves Pettigrew's life. Pettigrew now owes Harry a life, which then comes into play in the 7th book during Malfoy Manor when Peter Pettigrew is choking the life out of Harry. And Harry goes, you owe me. I saved your life. And Pettigrew relaxes his grip to then reach up and choke himself to death. So it's not exactly the same, but it is a life for a life. He just happens to save Harry's life. The moment he saves Harry's life is the moment that he dies. That's one. The second one is during the 2nd book at the end when Harry frees Dobby. Dobby looks at Harry and says, can I do anything for you? And Harry says, just make me one promise. Never save my life again. And Dobby goes, hell yeah. When he saves his life only once. And it's right after Pettigrew lets Harry go. Dobby then apparates Harry and the gang out of Malfoy Manor, away from death, only to die himself. Is it a coincidence that the knife that Bellatrix threw happens to hit him? Or is it just magical circumstances finding their way? Because the unbreakable vow, we don't get told how you die. We don't get told that, if you make an unbreakable vow, then if you break it, you just drop dead. No, it could be like a magical circumstance that, now the universe is out to kill you. You will not survive. Kind of like how Dobby broke his promise. We know house elf magic is a lot more powerful, and we don't know what the magic of the Goblet of Fire is. So the Goblet of Fire could or could not kill Harry, mind you that. And you're probably saying, but why would they kill the contestants of the Triwizard Tournament if they decided not to compete? Entertainment, dear viewer. Pure entertainment. Because what's going to make you compete more? The threat of death or the threat of glory? But you're probably also going to say, but they didn't have to actually build a competition for him. He could have just been like, here, they're going to face real dragons. You're going to face Fang dressed as a dragon. You're not actually going to win because we're going to give you less points because it's a dog dressed as a dragon. All right. And a second task, you're going to jump in that puddle and save Ron from that puddle. But since you didn't go in the lake, you're not going to get as many points. All right. Here's the maze. Jump in that bush. There's no cup in there, but see if you can find a cup. You may win. That's not how it works. He has to actually compete. Like he has to put full effort into, I mean, he probably didn't have to put full effort into competing, but if he didn't put full effort into competing, he would have died in the first task. So of course he has to put full effort into competing to not die, no matter what. But you also could say, what if he slept in? Would he have died? I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have let him sleep in. I mean, Dobby came and got him after the second task where he almost did sleep in. But I think if Dobby didn't get him, McGonagall would have. They would have been like, where is our fourth champion? All right, go find him. And they would have brought him in and go, you're going in the lake, boy. That was Flitwick. Flitwick would have said, you're going in the lake, boy. All right. But I think Harry would have had to compete or he would have died, which of course Voldemort didn't want, but we'll talk about Voldemort's plan, which of course Voldemort didn't want, but we'll talk about Voldemort's plan in a little bit. While we're on the topic of the Triwizard Tournament, let's talk about the first two tasks. What is their point? I'm always seeing people talk about that. What is the point of the first two tasks if the third task is winner take all? And I've seen someone try to explain it in the way that it's based on a point lead that, you know, the cup gives the winner 50 points. So if it's like the first person to get to the cup gets 50 points, the second person gets 25, and the third person gets 10, and the fourth person doesn't get anything. But they never said that. So why are we putting a point value to the cup? It's not the snitch. Because in most rules to challenges, we get explained pretty well how everything works and what the point value is. So I think that idea kind of works. It's like, okay, but it makes it more complicated. Like if Fleur got to the Triwizard Cup before Harry and then Harry comes up right after her, then Harry would have actually won because he would have gotten 25 points. Well, Fleur got 50, but Fleur was so far behind that Harry would have been up by 5 points or something like that, and Harry would have won the whole thing. But that doesn't make any sense. It's too complicated, and I think it doesn't really work because they didn't explain that's the cup's worth this many points. The first one to get to it, and they literally say the first one to get to the cup wins. So it's winner take all. So then what is the point of the first two challenges if it's winner take all? Well, it's kind of explained right there. Harry and Cedric are in the lead for points. They get to go in first. Crumb is behind them in points. He gets to go in second. Fleur is in last. She gets to go in last. There's a delay. We don't know how long the delay is. It may be based on the points. Like, hey, you're 15 points behind. You've got to wait 15 minutes. You're 5, or it's just a 5 minute. Like, hey, you get a 5 minute head start. You get a 5 minute head start, and Fleur, you can go. You're probably not going to make it, but go ahead, try. So that was the point of the first two tasks. The first two tasks test different sets of skills. The winner of those, or whoever does best, gets the most points, which allows them to go into the maze first, which gives them a head start because the maze tests a different set of skills. The first task tested how well you do under pressure when you're facing a dragon. Do you freeze? Can you actually interact with your surroundings, or do you just stand there and get burned up by dragon fire? Cool. The second one, it may not seem like it, but it's a puzzle. You get this egg, you have to figure out what the purpose of the egg is, you have to figure out how it works, and then you have to decipher the riddle within the egg to figure out how to complete the second task. The second task is easy. Swim down to the bottom of the lake, grab your person, swim back up. That's an easy challenge. Of course, people say the second challenge is boring because the second challenge started when they got the egg after the first challenge. The second challenge was about solving the puzzle. Can you solve the puzzle to get to the bottom of the lake? And I've seen a lot of people go, well, you know, how did Harry not know to go to the lake? Because didn't they make an announcement to everybody, hey, go to the lake? And so Neville could have even gone, go to the lake, because Hermione and Ron are at the bottom of said lake, but they may have told them at breakfast. Everybody would have gone to breakfast. Okay, we're going down to the lake today to watch the second task. But of course, Harry slept in and, you know, was in the library. So the point of the first two tasks were to test different sets of skills, where the third task is to test a variety of skills. Okay, you may be able to get past the Sphinx, but can you get past a blast-ended screw? All right, you got past the blast-ended screw, but what about this acromantula? Because you can't take the blast-ended screw down the same way you take the acromantula down. Do you know how to take both of those down? And that's what the important part of the maze is. It's not, can you get through the maze, but it's being able to adapt to different sets of problems. It's to test your magical prowess. And if you get to the end, you win, because clearly you are better than the other ones. And if you have a head start, yeah, it doesn't seem fair, but guess what? You're already good at the other two things, so you're gonna do well here anyway. We might as well give you a head start. And that is the point of the first two tasks, to give you a point base so they can figure out how to get into the maze. And other Triwizard tournaments may have been different. We don't know, because we don't really know anything about the other Triwizard tournaments. If we get more information on it, it might change what the original Triwizard tournament that we see actually stands for and what everything means in it. So this video may be obsolete in like 4 years. Who knows? But right now, the first two tasks determine the order of the entering of the maze for the third task to give the better wizards the head start. You've probably noticed my hat. I like my hat. I just got my hat and it says Marvelous Marauders. It's my hat. It's literally this channel on my hat. And I may start selling merch, but I don't know if the channel is ready for merch. So if you're interested in buying Marvelous Marauders merch, okay, I like it because it's my logo, I designed it, and it's my channel. If you like it, that's really cool, but I want to know what kind of merch you guys would like, because I'm only going to make merch that I want, but I want to know what you guys want. If you guys want merch, that's awesome. Just let me know. If you don't want merch, cool, but I have a hat. I like my hat. And if this is the only hat that ever gets made, cool. I still have a hat. So if you want to see some merch, just let me know in the comments and maybe I'll start looking into trying to make merch for my channel. Let's get back to the video. So now we're talking about the third task. Let's talk about the port key at the end of the maze. So we're taught about port keys. Port keys go one way. You grab on a port key, it takes you to a place, it's done. It's based on timing. I think port keys are a little weirdly complicated because there are some cases where it's like, hey, this is set to send you off at this time, this day. You have to be at this location, have your hand on this item, and it will deliver you to where you need to be. Okay. But we've seen other situations, jumping ahead to Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore just makes a port key and goes, here you go, it's going to take you back, just put your hand on it, and it works. He does it twice. He does it in the Ministry of Magic. How does the Triwizard Tournament trophy work as a port key? I think it was always a port key, because we never see a port key be able to take you back. But what if the cup was always a port key that brought you from the center of the maze to the front? Because that's the question that I always had. Not how does the port key bring you from the graveyard, where when you grabbed it, it was in the middle of the maze, you used it, when it brought you back, it brought you to the front of the maze. Why the front of the maze? I think it was always designed to bring you to the front of the maze, and that's why it wasn't suspicious that Barty Crouch Jr. turned it into a port key in the first place, because it was always a port key. It was set to bring you from the middle of the maze, where the port key was, to the front of the maze, holding the trophy, because if you grabbed onto the trophy, it teleports you to the front of the maze, and you're just standing there in front of everybody holding the trophy. And everybody seemed like, oh, that's normal. He just showed up. That's cool. Nobody was like, how did he do that? No, nobody was shocked by that. It was the fact that he got teleported to the graveyard that kind of messed everything up. So it was already a port key that then got turned into a second port key. So of course it took him to the graveyard first, but when he grabbed it again, it then reverted back to its original port key form and took him back to the beginning of the maze. That's how it was able to go back and forth, because normal port keys can't do that. The timing one, maybe you can set a secondary spell that's like, hey, it's going to go off at this time. So you can set a port key for someone without having to worry about it. But then there's also port keys that as soon as you stick your hand on it, it goes. And we only know about the timing thing because it was a scheduling for the Quidditch World Cup. But maybe it was, hey, the port key's not going to leave without you, which the port key did do that in the 7th book. So port keys in themselves are a little inconsistent, because they talked about how, like, when they were port keying from the different houses of the Order to the Weasley's house, that there were things that showed up without them. But then there's also moments it's like, oh, port keys just work whenever they want. Like you grab them, it takes you there. But you know, some port keys will travel by themselves. So maybe you could put time on it. Maybe the ones for the Quidditch World Cup were like, hey, each port key has to come in at a different time to prevent a bunch of people from port keying into the same area at the same time, or, you know, wherever. So make sure you come in at 8:15, or it just goes off at 8:15. And if you didn't grab it, you're gone. But they also talked about how were they waiting for anybody else before they grabbed the port key? So I think port keys can go off by themselves, but in most cases you have to grab them to activate them. All right, here's the big one. We have one more after this, but let's go with the big one first. Voldemort's plan is way too complicated in this. So let's set you up. He finds out about the Triwizard Tournament. Okay, cool. He then finds out about Barty Crouch Jr. still being alive. Okay, easy enough. Let's go get Barty Crouch Jr. He also finds out from Barty Crouch Sr. that Alastor Moody is coming out of retirement as an Auror to become the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher for Hogwarts. Okay. Then Peter Pettigrew and Barty Crouch Jr. go to Alastor Moody's house, attack him, shove him in his case, take his hair, turn it into a polyjuice potion. So they've already had to make the polyjuice potion ahead of time in preparation to this, which takes at least 30 days. So that's a long time, because the Triwizard Tournament took place a week before school started. They already knew they were going to attack Mad Eye Moody, even though Barty Crouch Jr. technically hadn't been freed yet. So Barty Crouch Sr. couldn't have told Voldemort that Aleister Moody was coming out of retirement. Bertha Jorkins would have had to tell Voldemort, but why would Bertha Jorkins know anything about Aleister Moody coming out of retirement to work at Hogwarts? Because she worked for the Magical Game and Sports Division at the time. So she wouldn't know anything about the going-ons of Hogwarts. Barty Crouch Sr. may have known a little bit about the going-ons at Hogwarts just because he was the previous head of the law enforcement department. So he probably would have been told, yeah, did you hear? Aleister Moody's coming out of retirement to work at Hogwarts, old sucker. So the timeline kind of works really weird, but maybe Peter Pettigrew produced Polyjuice Potion because just in case he needed it. That's a lot of peas, but let's give him that. Peter Pettigrew produced Polyjuice Potion ahead of time just in case they needed it for some plan. They knew where Barty Crouch Jr. was. They were just waiting for an opportune moment to get to them, and they went and found Barty Crouch Sr., Barty Crouch Jr., Imperioed Barty Crouch Sr., Barty Crouch Jr., and Peter Pettigrew then went to Aleister Moody's house, took him down, and then entered the school. Okay, I'll give you all that. I don't understand how Peter Pettigrew and Barty Crouch Jr. were able to take out a trained Auror, but I'll give you it. Maybe they caught him off guard. Constant vigilance in your old age doesn't really work, does it, Alastor? But still is clearly one of the strongest people besides Dumbledore, seeing as Voldemort goes after him before he goes after Kingsley. But, you know, whatever. One guy who's been Imperious and the other guy who's been a rat for 12 years, they can take out a retired, trained Auror who is one of the best Aurors in existence. Okay, right there is the flaw in the plan. But he succeeds, so we'll give it that. Then it's, hey, let's put the name in the Goblet of Fire and make sure that the Goblet of Fire spits out that name. Okay, only a powerful wizard. So clearly Barty Crouch Jr. is more powerful than we expected because he was able to hoodwink the Goblet of Fire, which apparently is very hard to do, and even some of the professors don't believe that it's capable of happening. Okay, the rest of it seems fine. The manipulation of events to make sure that Harry can get through all of the challenges, easy enough. You know, use your broomstick, Potter. Or, I hope he's using gillyweed, because he already knows the connection with Dobby. So I guess the backup for Dobby was Neville, which I guess he did say, hey, I gave Neville the book that you would need. If you had asked him what you had needed, he would have given it to you. And that's why in the movie they were just like, yeah, I have this book, it gave it, just to streamline it, make it look like it makes sense. You know, there's no magical turnip, but there is gillyweed. It worked. It was set up in the book, so it works in the movie. Then the maze makes sense. He can see through. Cool. The plan kind of ends once he gets to the graveyard. It's like, what do we do from here? We got Harry. And there's been theories on, you know, what would have happened if Voldemort killed Harry? Because the whole idea was, hey, we want Voldemort to come back and nobody know, but if Harry never shows back up at the end, what happened to him? And there's the idea, okay, well, they're already using Polyjuice Potion, so they could use Polyjuice Potion to have somebody, whether it be Peter Pettigrew, whether it be Voldemort, take Polyjuice Potion and come back to be able to pretend to be Harry. Honestly, if that theory is true, I would have said Peter Pettigrew, because Peter Pettigrew already knows what he needs to know about Ron and Hermione. He could flawlessly fit in and probably do a pretty good Harry impression. Like, he knows James, so he knows the mannerisms, and he's literally been with Ron, Hermione, and Harry for 4 years. The only one he may not be able to trick is Crookshanks. I'd like a little what-if story of, you know, all of a sudden Crookshanks starts hating Harry, and then they find out that Harry was actually Peter Pettigrew the whole time, and it's like, really? Again? First you were my rat, now you're my best friend? Stop it. But anyway, off topic. Voldemort's plan, very complicated, but if you actually break it down piece by piece, it actually does kind of make sense. The only thing that I have a problem with is, how did they take down Mad Eye Moody so easily? Is Barty Crouch Jr. that good? I don't know, but they were able to, so that's how it works. All right, and the final misconception for today is Voldemort. Just, if you kill Voldemort, does he turn into a ghost? Is the potion that they created for Voldemort to get his body back something that you have to do with a Horcrux? Is that something that you need to know? I don't think so. I've seen where people are like, yeah, no, that's they have to do that magic to be able to bring back his body. And I think that was something he had made in a discovery of things, but I think if you were to walk up to Voldemort and go, Avada Kedavra, he would just look at you and go, were you just trying to kill me? I can't die. And that would have been it. The reason the whole happenstance of him not having a body is not because he died, because they didn't find Voldemort's body after he attacked the Potters. He blew up the house. That was why it was so amazing that Harry survived. The house was in rubble. Harry was buried, but since he was in the crib, it just kind of like protected him. Magically enforced crib, I guess. I don't know. But Harry was protected in the crib with just a scar on his forehead. I think Dumbledore would have been a little less worried if there was just a dead Voldemort sitting there. But there was no Voldemort body, and that's why he thinks that Voldemort isn't dead yet. No body, no crime. That's bottom line, you know. If you do not see them die, it means they're coming back. It's the same thing in comic books, you know, no body, no crime. If you don't see them die on screen, they are not dead. And Dumbledore follows that to the T. I did not see a single Voldemort corpse. He's still out there. And he was right. So, and that's why a lot of people hated how the 8th movie ended, is because, you know, Voldemort just kind of ashes away, where in the 7th book, to confirm that Voldemort is dead, his body's just laying there, which is 100%. I don't think he was supposed to turn into the ghost, but because of the Horcrux situation, his soul could not die, but since his body was completely destroyed, he was stuck. And I think if he knew of this magical potion that would allow him to bring his body back, he would have done that way sooner. He was able to get control of Quirrell. So of course he would have probably been able to do the same idea, because even Peter Pettigrew says, Master, we don't have to use Harry. We could use anybody as your enemy. So clearly he could have done that from day one. He could have immediately found one of his followers who were probably around and been like, oh, I need a body. And then they could just grab someone off the street who's still afraid of Voldemort and go, yeah, we're gonna use your blood and bring his body back. I don't think he would turn into a weird soul spirit thing in every occasion. I think that was a small caveat to the fact that he had lost his body in the explosion with the backfire of the curse. If you had walked up behind him and said Avada Kedavra, he probably would have turned around and punched you in the face and then Avada Kedavra you. But because it's explained with the Horcruxes, if you were to run Ron through with the sword, you would harm his body but not his soul. The same thing would happen with running the book through with a sword, except for the Sword of Gryffindor. It would have hurt the diary but not hurt the soul within it. The soul would still be intact. So the same thing would happen to Voldemort. If you ran him through with a sword, not the Sword of Gryffindor, but just with a sword, he would have just stabbed into him and he would have pulled it out and gone, was that supposed to hurt? And then Avada Kedavra you. But the Sword of Gryffindor would have killed him. I think the Sword of Gryffindor would kill anybody because of the basilisk venom, but the Sword of Gryffindor would have killed Voldemort. A normal sword would have just poked a hole into him and then he would have been able to heal himself. That makes sense. The ghost form of Voldemort is a byproduct of the explosion, not because he died. If he dies, his body still stays alive. He doesn't lose his body fully, because if that were the case, there would have been research on, hey, be careful if you use a Horcrux, because if you die, you turn it into an angry soul thing, and you have to use all this stuff, so you need to make sure you have someone who's on your side to have a potion ready for you to jump in if you die when you get into a dangerous situation. Which Voldemort, being who he was, would have had that if that were the case. So to those who think that Harpo the Foul, who created the Horcrux, also created this potion, he may have, but it's not something that was in the books because it was not something that he had to use. Nobody knew if that potion worked, so it was just kind of like, all right, it may work, we don't know. So hope that answers that question. Is Ghost Voldemort was just an unfortunate byproduct of the explosion of the Potter's home and is not a normal circumstance for a Horcrux. A normal Horcrux, as long as your body is not destroyed, you just survive. But since Voldemort's body was completely incinerated, he had to find another way to survive. And as always, no body, no crime. All right, that's the 6 misconceptions that a lot of people seem to get mixed up or wrong, or just ask a lot of questions on how it works, but never actually get them answered. So hopefully that answered those 6 questions for you. If you like these deep dives, make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, stay marvelous, Nox.